What wedding moment made you think they are not going to last long? As a wedding photographer, I have been to more than my share of weddings. 1. It was a real shotgun wedding. Dad didn't realize it would not stand up in court. Only time the groom was more excited to have photos than the bride. 2. She wanted a limo. He thought a hearse would be better and kept doing lurch impressions from the Addams Family. 3. Her friends took turns motorboating her, females, and he said, "Get it out of your system, as after tonight you never get to do that again." It was a good sign also when she dove into the pool with her bridesmaids at the reception, in her wedding dress. 4. Don't know what happened. Sat down with bride and groom, filling out the contract, got the deposit. He stood up, said forget it, and walked out. 2 months later I get told the wedding is off. 3 months later she calls to rebook. Different groom. Day of the wedding I am at the church. Got the final payment the week before. No one shows. No one. Just me and the DJ. That last one had me burst out laughing. Sorry though, what a pain in the butt. I'm witnessing one from the sidelines now. My wife's brother just got married this past May. Bride's mother is a big DIY person and went a little nuts with extra flowers, table pieces, decorations, etc. Note I said extra. It was already decorated by the venue. She just took it upon herself to buy and add way more stuff. Anyway, a few weeks ago she sent my groom's mom, an email with receipts of all the extra stuff she bought, $7,000 worth, and asked that she pay half since it was technically set up in time for the rehearsal dinner for guests to enjoy. It's causing a huge rift between the newlyweds since the bride is taking her mom's side. Gosh, help, when unasked for, can be the absolute worst. She told me 2 days before that she found her fiancé annoying and that she didn't like him and that he was awful in bed. She was visibly, endlessly uncomfortable at the rehearsal wedding dinner combo. Then she sobbed the entire morning, day of. She ended up not getting any makeup done cause she wouldn't stop scream sobbing and refused to get dressed, stalling the wedding 35 minutes. She then said 45 minutes of vows that she had prepared, 9 pages of things like inappropriate vows to friends and family, his parents and sisters, none of them her husband, and then almost didn't say I do. Managed to get yeah, okay, yeah I do out of her almost a full 60 seconds after she was supposed to say anything. I could go on for hours, but it was the most painful and awkward wedding I've ever been to. I've got my money on 10 months. We're 1 month in. My wife got invited to her client's daughter's wedding. The couple were both drama students. Many of the bridal party were drama students. The maid of honor's toast consisted of tearful declarations of unrequited love to the groom, along the lines of "if it couldn't be me, I'm glad it's my best friend that's marrying you." The best man's speech was a lusty declaration of "if it doesn't work out, call me, babe, like the previous time you called me." Other toasts were similarly weird. A guy at the table I was seated at was a friend of the bride and said to me that he was this close to standing up during the "speak now or forever hold your peace" thing. I'm still not sure if the whole thing was a bunch of emotionally fricked up 20-year-olds or one big piece of performance art. I've got 2. One of my good friends got married and I'd never met her before the wedding because she's just shy. On the wedding day, she was belligerently drunk before the ceremony even started and couldn't even get through the lines she was supposed to repeat. That is, "I promise to love you." She ended up slapping the groom, spilling champagne on her dress, and then crying under a table while he tried to comfort her. They lasted about 4 months. Another one was my wife's friend. She's a very conservative, religious white girl who married a black man. Most of her racist family didn't approve of the marriage and didn't show up, but she planned the whole marriage around race. Like a vanilla cake for her and a chocolate cake for him. The wedding colors were black and white, and even the meals were white meat for her side and dark meat for his. It was extremely uncomfortable as a guest. They lasted 2 years but broke up because he was abusive and almost killed her, rather than the weird racial tension. He ended up at the emergency room between the ceremony and the reception. He went out the night before with his sister and friends and got plastered. They had to hold a cold pack to the back of his neck to keep him vertical during the wedding photos. Marriage lasted 30 days until they had a fight. She left the house and he filled the U-Haul truck with everything but her clothes. When they were doing the vows and the priest got to the for richer or poorer part and she said for richer or richer and maybe for poorer, the officiant was not pleased. I think they made it a year. I was maid of honor. Me, best man and a couple went into a separate little room to do the signing stuff. Bride excused herself to go the bathroom and the groom started making pretty mean remarks about her cooking. She's passionate about, to the officiary. She came back, heard they were talking about cooking family meals together and gave him the warmest smile. Thinking he had praised her, he scoffed awkwardly and changed the topic. That always stuck with me. He wasn't laughing with her but at her, behind her back. They lasted 7 months. This one is so heartbreaking. Hope your friend is doing better now. When the bride drank vodka out of a pint glass and spent a significant amount of time making out with another guy on the dance floor. The poor groom. This makes me sad. What a soul-crushing thing to observe at your own wedding. Yikes. Wedding videographer here. I think my favorite moment was when I was sitting at the miscellaneous table with all the randoms and the girl next to me, the groom's ex, drunkenly admitted to sleeping with the groom a few months prior. My uncle, when he broke his neck trying to break dance on his stag do, he went down the aisle in a wheelchair. She divorced shortly after. He can walk again now but because of his surgery he cannot turn his neck. One of my go-to stories because it's freaking insane. One dude who physically will never have his head turned by another woman. I was at a wedding when a phone went off during the ceremony, in the middle of exchanging vows. It was the groom's. He took the call. They are divorced now. One of my friends got married. Afterwards she looked at me, crying, and said, "What did I do?" They were separated by the time the plane landed from their honeymoon. He was a good guy, she was a mess. The betta fish and the flower centerpieces lasted longer than the marriage. When my sister married her first husband she mouthed to my father walking her down the aisle, "I can make this work, right?" They were divorced 6 months later. My whole family knew it wasn't a good idea since the original engagement a year prior. When the bride tried to playfully feed the groom some cake, pulling it back once it got close to his mouth. The third time she did this, he slapped it out of her hand and stormed off. In the ensuing awkward silence and wide-eyed staring, we all knew it wouldn't last. Surprisingly, they were together for nearly 2 years before the bride eloped away with her stepbrother. No one saw that coming. That's a weird Pornhub plot. Where to start? The best man was the groom's coke dealer who dressed in a tux, the only one in a tux. The groom was high on coke and giggled throughout the whole ceremony. The host of the party alternated between arguing with his wife in Russian and running up to us every time he saw us, the bride's friends, the only people that showed up from her side for the wedding. Whenever he saw us in groups of 2 or more and tell us don't smoke weed, if she, his wife, won't let me smoke weed in the house then you guys can't. Every time we grouped up, you know you've fricked up when your plug is the classiest person at your wedding. Prior to my wedding I'd asked my husband to practice dancing with me because I'm uncoordinated due to a disability. He blew me off and said we'd be fine. As we were dancing, he spoke in my ear, not even quietly. "What are you doing? What's wrong with you? You're embarrassing me." We lasted 2 years. Leaving was the best decision I ever made. Whoa, I'm so sorry you had to go through that. Happy to hear you're doing better without that piece of crap now. The bride had a bruised eye covered by makeup. Also it was visible that walking was hurting her. I might think it was because the corset was pushing on broken ribs. Took her 3 years to run away. That's horrible. My brother's ex-wife. Throughout the exchange of vows, she was looking at everyone but my brother, making sure all eyes were on her. Later, she instructed the photographer, a family friend who was cheap, to mingle and get shots of people being happy. Within 10 minutes, she'd summoned the photographer back shouting, "Whose wedding is this? I meant get shots of people being happy for me." The bachelor party and the bachelorette party were in Vegas at the same time. Across the hall from each other, the bride and groom got in a huge fight on the last night of the trip, and when I was leaving I said, "I'll see you guys at the wedding" to the groom, and he replied, "I'm not sure there's gonna be one." There was a wedding, but they were divorced within 18 months I believe. One of my friends was the best man at another friend of ours' wedding. His best man speech included this line: "I prepared some lines for tonight, but the groom sniffed them all in the bathroom." 3 months later there was a divorce due to a coke problem. When they got married illegally in high school, two 16-year-olds from different states who had to lie on their certificates to get approved by the state. It was an older when the father of the groom found out. I actually know a happy version of this. My HS English teacher's friend and her boyfriend took a bus to the next state over where you could get married at 16, and so they eloped in secret and came out about it after they graduated and have been married for over 40 years and counting. At my boyfriend's sister's wedding, the groom got drunk before the vows and smoked weed after the vows. Was cross-faded as heck and made a fool of himself. When we went up to congratulate them after, she refused to be near him or take pictures with him. It was awkward. After the speeches basically everyone left. Family was still around and they opened gifts. Someone gifted nice champagne and the groom tried to open it and dropped it and it shattered. Bride stormed off screaming. Groom got upset and started cussing out the air. They still went to their honeymoon together in Florida and she got pregnant almost immediately. Maybe 7 months into her pregnancy she kicked him out because he slept with her roommate. They got divorced when their kid was 6 months old. But it's for the best. The dude is a pose and wasted a lot of their money by being selfish on their day. 2 friends of mine got married, and when they gave their vows, the guy started laughing at the part about being faithful. Oops. I once watched a live stream of the wrong Vegas wedding. The link I was given for a friend's wedding was incorrect, and during the exchange of vows, the groom got to the part about being faithful, and the bride visibly and audibly chuckled. It was hilarious to watch, but I bet they didn't last long. He got so fricked up at the reception he had a fist fight with her cousin in the toilets over coke. He told all the other cousins to frick off. He hit on my aunt. He told my cousin's child to come back to him when she was 15/16, and he forgot to bring his child to the hotel. The groom showed up drunk after golfing with buddies all day. The bride in her vows said for richer, left out the poorer. The groom showed up to his own reception wearing a t-shirt with restroom sign style stick figures depicting a bride and groom captioned "Game Over." When the groom went in for the kiss after their vows and the bride presented her cheek instead, they divorced less than a year later after it was discovered she had been cheating on him pretty much their entire relationship. I hope you're doing better, Isaac. The groom and best man had a dancing routine for getting into the church ceremony and they got nearly halfway through it, and I guess the groom felt they hadn't received much applause and wows from us the attendees and decided to go back to the entrance and start all over. Sigh. Why is no one having a good time? I specifically requested it. Groom got into a fist fight with the father of the bride. Split after 4 months. Context: groom and bride's dad. Actually most people in these families, if I'm honest, have pretty aggressive drinking problems. Father-in-law has always hated him. I wasn't around for what actually set it off, but it ended when the bride got in the middle, got an elbow in the eye, and the happy couple left for the night. This was in rural Canada. Not Letterkenny, but basically Letterkenny. I'd say the father-in-law won the fight though. That's one long fight. The entire bridal party, including parents of the wedded couple, entering into a betting pool of how long the marriage would last. At the wedding reception, if I recall correctly, the best man won. Price is Right rules, at 14 months. Surely you confide in your friends or even your parents about the whole thing, but who am I to say? The bride and groom did the first dance, then spent the rest of their reception completely apart from each other, getting crap-faced with their own separate friend groups. The only other dancing all night was the bride dancing with her high school friends, the father-daughter dance and the mother-son dance, during which the groom was crying. The best man's speech didn't mention the bride at all and basically boiled down to groom. You're married now, but our bond is older and stronger. All of our hunting and fishing trips together are the best thing in our lives. Can't wait for more. Such a sad, desperate atmosphere. They made it a little over 1 year. Portuguese wedding. Fist fight broke out at the head table during the reception between 2 groomsmen. They were arguing about which of them had slept with the bride first. Groom was oblivious. He came home from work early one day 2 years later and caught her in bed with another man. Surprised it took that long. Midnight buffet was amazing though. As a Portuguese person, I can confirm Portuguese weddings have the best food, especially the midnight buffets. The most beautiful wedding I've been to ended in divorce. Venue was where the groom's father is buried and he cried as he made his vows to the bride there. It turned out he'd been cheating on her for months and they divorced a while later. Something so repugnant about marrying someone you're cheating on practically over your father's grave. To date, it's the only wedding I've been to that ended in divorce. My friend got married to her boyfriend of 15 years. It was an urgent wedding because her mom was dying of terminal cancer. She was given a few months to live and died 2 weeks after the wedding. The wedding was beautiful, and also was a funeral. My friend found out later that her husband had been cheating on her. He is the one person I've known who I may struggle to ever forgive. The best man's speech was about how selfishly the groom had acted during a night out and telling him to treat marriage differently. The groom had a best woman instead of a best man. Nothing wrong with that, but her toast left the whole room in awkward silence because she was clearly in love with him. My best friend's wedding is tomorrow and I told her about how I've heard several wedding photographers, videographers say that shoving cake in the face is almost a for sure factor that they're going to divorce. She told me, oh yeah, I told him not to, but he probably will anyway, so we'll see how this goes. Update. She put the cake in his mouth respectfully, but he booped her nose 2 or 3 times, which wasn't huge, and they just laughed it off. I cried a couple times during this wedding because their love does seem very genuine. So sorry if this wasn't the update you were hoping for, lol, but I'll give a 1-year update. I've heard some version of that cake smashing story so many times I feel like there needs to be a sigh about it. Marriages survive affairs more often than they survive an unwanted cake smashing. He complained she was mean to him throughout their dating life. The day before the wedding, all of the groomsmen and the groom's friends told him not to marry the girl. Like straight up. They lasted less than a year. They got secretly married at the local town hall out of spite to the girl's father, who did not agree with the relationship. This happened right out of high school and they divorced during my sophomore year at college. Spite, the foundation of all great marriages. When he smashed the cake in her face and hair, then went off drinking with his buddies. In 12 weeks, she filed. Good thing I didn't buy an expensive gift. I freaking despise the cake in the face and hair thing. It's unnecessary and not funny. The bride has usually spent a lot of money to get her face and hair done. It's not cool. When the groom started off his speech by saying, "We all know I didn't want to get married, but we're here for bride and child we had together." 1 year. 3 months later they were finished. That is so sad. I'm a wedding photographer and I have a few of these. When a very young, not dating long couple say things like the partner is perfect and we never fight. When there's name calling, I particularly cringe that it's because we so get each other and are so comfortable that he can call me dumbass as a nickname. They didn't last the year. One where the wedding was all about the groom promoting his band. He even sang his bride a song that was literally just him showing off his vocal range with some classic piece. She stood up and joined him on stage halfway through and he looked annoyed that he had to share the limelight. They lasted about 2 years. He was sleeping with the other vocalist in the band. This was my sister's best friend and it was a bachelorette party moment. Bride had been having an affair. Everyone knew it. The groom's friends tried to tell him, but she convinced him they were making it up. I mean, at that point it was just sad. She actually had the balls to force fiancé to apologize to the guy she was sleeping with for the accusations. The night of the bachelorette party she actually took all her bridesmaids back to the other guy's house and spent the night with him. He came to their wedding. It was so awkward. Everyone knew and everyone was talking. The groom was told, but chose to overlook it. After the wedding she insisted the other guy come on vacations with her and her husband and included him in all their social functions. Now, if they're non-monogamous, whatever, go crazy. But her husband was an absolute wreck about it for years and she just kept gaslighting him. No one could convince him to leave her. She told my sister that a fair guy insisted he would never marry her and didn't want kids, so she was using fiancé to get them. They ended up divorcing 2 years later after their second child was born. She immediately moved in with a fair guy and they did end up getting married. How unbelievably cruel. Showed up to the wedding of a friend of my husband's who I knew casually. When we arrived at the church the groom was very drunk in the parking lot. and getting drunker by the minute. I thought it was kinda nuts since it was a full Catholic ceremony which involved lots of kneeling and standing. I honestly have no idea how he made it thought that, but he did. At the reception, he proceeded to continue the drinking party, while his new wife cried in the washroom. When it was time for the first dance, he kind of stumbled around the dance floor despite a year of dance lessons. When it was time for him to take his new wife's garter off and throw it to the bachelors, he instead did a striptease type dance and got himself down to his underwear in front of many elderly family members. People were shocked and talking, and all in all it was a crap show. I gave this marriage a year or two tops. They, however, are still married 25 plus years later. When it was time for him to take his new wife's garter off and throw it to the bachelors, he instead did a striptease type dance and got himself down to his underwear. I mean, even getting blind drunk. The result here is so far away from the objective, I just wonder what was going through his head, lol. I was kindly included in a last minute +1 to the wedding of a family friend who I'd never met before. At the rehearsal dinner, or the German equivalent, the Polterabend, the guests smashed ceramic and porcelain items on the ground. I was fresh in Germany, so this was all pretty out of context and frightening, but my boyfriend explained that it's a tradition, reminding the couple that life is sometimes difficult and you have to work together to clean it up. The bride kind of half-heartedly motioned to the groom to sweep it up. He did a little bit, then just moved on to talk to his friends, leaving most of the shards strewn around the yard. Additionally, I don't think I saw the couple talk to each other once over the next 3 days of celebrations. It was a gorgeous wedding, and I'm so grateful that I was invited. Really good way to begin living in a new country, but it wasn't surprising to hear that they divorced a few years later. Oof, how symbolic. I live for these threads. Anyway, I know a photographer who was offered to shoot a wedding on the Gold Coast, Australia. If you're from Australia, then you know the Gold Coast, while beautiful, has a lot of Jersey Shore types living there. It's kind of like Miami but no celebrities and very trashy. My friend is getting shots of everybody getting dressed up at the same time because the groomsmen, bride and bridesmaids are all getting ready in the same room. The groom decided to have his bucks party, bachelor, stag do, the night before, so they're all hungover as crap and snorting line after line of coke. Something that is making my photographer friend's job hard because she can't get any nice shots of the groom or groomsmen without these illicit drugs in view. The energy in the room is getting uncomfortable, so the bride asks if they could take it easy on the coke and get a couple of nice photos. The groom yells, "Shut up, see," and keeps snorting. The girl who got my friend the gig said they divorced like 4 months later. Another friend of mine was pressured into marrying his girlfriend of like 8 years because she dropped an ultimatum. "Propose to me within a year or we're done." He does, so they get married, but of every wedding photo she posted on Facebook, neither one of them looked happy. They divorced barely a year into their marriage. I wonder how many marriages prevail after shut up. See. Just before the wedding started, my mother turned to me and said, "You are making the biggest mistake of your life. If we get in the car and leave now, I will never say another word." She was right. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.